All right, folks, welcome back to another Showdown Cram. We had a lot of fun on Monday night, and based on some of the screenshots and stuff you guys were showing me in the Discord, seemed like you guys did pretty well on that slate. Tonight, we have another fun one, and to help me out here is one of the head honchos over at Run the Sims, the man powering the tools that are helping us win at Showdown. Justin Freeman, welcome back to the channel, my man.
Yeah, it's awesome to be back. I'm a big Washington football team, fan and insider, of course. So we're gonna be able to nail down this slate. Everybody's really turned off by it, like it's Washington and Giants, and I think that should be a Showdown player's dream, honestly.
Yeah, that's the thing. To me, it's like more the casual public is like gross. I mean, I feel like you have to turn in your Showdown Bro card if you're not excited for a slate like this.
Exactly. Like you want a slate where, the tight end 3 catches the one fluke touchdown, gets 9 DK points, and is in the winning lineup. Like that's the dream. And you're solo binking for a milli tonight.
For sure. So what we're going to do here, and one of the reasons I'm so excited to have the Run the Sims tools is because last year I was starting to do some of these Showdown crams, and it's just like, I don't want to just talk about like random players or guys I like. I want to see what the math in the Sims are telling us to do, and then make smart decisions based off of that, using that as kind of the guidelines for how we do it. But I'm curious, because you've obviously played a ton of Showdown. You've built these tools. What is kind of like your workflow for how to use this to actually get to your final lineups?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I'm working on, and I guess one thing that's different from this process this year versus last year is like, now I'm sharing this with other people, right? So you're getting what I think is the best possible sort of baseline projection in there right now. And so I've got a very heavy hand involved in sort of how all of these numbers are calculated. So that would have been a big part of my process last year, was trying to really zero in those numbers. Well, now that part is sort of right here in front of you. So the hard part's done. I think the next natural step is to say, well, there's a few options from here. You can just click Run the Sims, and we'll take exactly what the simulator wants to give us, or we can go in and say like, okay, we know that, Vegas has this projected low scoring, but what if it's a shootout? Or what if it's super one-sided and Washington wins by 20? Or, like whatever we want to sort of say is the base script. And so I guess one thing I would say is like, we sort of allow all of those outcomes to happen, even based on the current simulation, but we're sort of centering the sim on this base expectation. Washington by 3.5 points, I think it is right now.
Yeah.
So we can get crazy, but some of those things are happening anyway. But if you just want more of them sort of floating up towards the top of your lineups, you just sort of cheat the simulator and tell it exactly what you want. So I like to kind of go in and make sure I feel really tight about the market share assumptions, like especially when there is a really fragile assumption in there, kind of like the Saquon news tonight. Like we know Saquon coming off of a short week, coming off of an ACL, kind of a tough situation for him. Like, I mean, there's a lot of reason to suspect that possibly the Giants give him, sort of secondary type usage. I mean, obviously he'll still be out there taking the first snap, but could they possibly go like a true 50-50 with him and Booker? What could that potentially look like? So whenever I feel like the assumptions are really fragile, sometimes I'll play around with those.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And, we were having fun on Monday night, flipping Henry Ruggs and Darren Waller's target share. That's more in the fanciful line of messing with things. But like you said, some of these situations are really fragile. And, especially if you're messing with like the wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4, right? Like if you wanted to mess with Darius Slayton versus Kadarius Toney, that's a little more defensible than flipping Sterling Shepard and Kadarius Toney.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's the thing is like you want to try to identify things where you're not completely drawing dead. The power of the simulations is to tell you how often each combination succeeds. And so by, every little thing that you're tweaking off of optimal is making you just a little bit further away from that.
Yeah. And so one of the questions I had, and I know I asked you about this a while ago too, but just kind of understanding more like macro rates here for when I'm adjusting, pace or rush rate or whatever. When I change the points scored, the rush rate doesn't automatically change, does it?
It does not. And so that's kind of the thing is like, the points scored currently, the way it sits, is correlated with the pace
Yes.
and the rush rate and the rushing touchdown ratio for that matter. So to change one, you almost have to start thinking about, well, I want the Giants to go from 18.8 here to 24.8 or something like that. Now all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, that probably means they were out there for more plays. That probably meant that they had long sustained drives. Maybe that rush rate is a little bit less than we expected because they're starting to move the ball through the air. So you have to kind of think like what pairs well with that based on the game script. Because like you say, you're trying to trick the optimizer into thinking that like this is the new base state of this game is sort of centered on that. So they're not completely linked right now. You have to do that linking yourself.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And just real quick too, before we get a little bit more in the weeds, I know you listened to Brian and I talk last night on Lowell's a little bit about his Sims process. Did you have any follow-ups on that? Like based on kind of how I was talking about the Run the Sims versus Brian's process, or any comments on that? Because a lot of people found that interesting.
Yeah, no, Brian still hides just enough of his process to make it where I can't completely, ask too many perfect questions against it. But it sounds like we kind of come at it rather similarly, which is to try to identify what the base state of the game is and then let the natural correlations occur. Now, I think where the second layer comes in, and possibly this is sort of what Blender would be talking about when I went on with him, was the idea of trying to then pencil a value for the actual lineups in terms of where they would tend to finish within contests. So simulating contests, that's kind of a whole nother bag of worms. But I think it sounds like Brian and I's process is probably relatively similar. I remember you asked him whether or not he cared about any particular game script when he runs his, like, does he even know what he's rooting for? And it sounds like probably not until last drive of the fourth quarter or whatever, right? So it just sort of let all the best lineups come to the top. And I'm not sure if he's filtering more other than that. I mean, I'm sure he has a little bit more sort of uniqueness identifiers for Showdown specifically, but for his classic stuff, whether he's just simply playing the best plays from there, that was the only thing I wasn't quite sure what to take away.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what, it sounds like his process is, again, way more kind of like automated and all encompassing, where he has something balancing that out. Where what I kind of like as far as like showing your work for us is that we can tweak these assumptions and then actually see the type of lineups that are getting spit out. And to me, that's really instructive. So why don't we just start here? We'll run the Sims with the base level or baseline assumptions in here for the inputs, and we'll check out the type of players we're seeing show up. Obviously a lot of the typical guys we'd expect, the quarterbacks: Antonio Gibson, McLaurin, Barkley, Kenny Galladay. When you land on this optimal results page, how is your brain processing this information? What things are you looking for here?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the type of player you are. Are you a sort of a mass enter specialist, or are you a three max type of person? Because I tend to play 150. I tend, so far this year, I've been doing that on FanDuel and Yahoo. I like my edges over there for one reason or the other, and so like I basically skip past this page and go straight to the lineups. But I think the important thing here, if you were sort of a hand builder, is to try to identify sort of the next step. And eventually, I think we're very close, maybe within a week, of getting ownership thrown up here to be able to identify whether your players that you are keyed in on are going to be over or under owned compared to optimal, because I think that's going to be such a huge decision. And it also matters, like, are you trying to like take down the millie, or are you playing $100 single entry with 100 people? Completely different strategies there. So I think ultimately you just want to sort of, I like to just land on the captain and build from there. That may be kind of cliche or whatever, but I mean, I think you just want to sort of insert just enough leverage, but you're mostly just wanting to build a really strong lineup that's super, super correlated.
Yep. And, the first thing I did today when I ran this initial thing, I was going and comparing to a couple ownership projection sets. And the things that stood out to me was, based on this default sim for this projection, that the Giants are offering the most captain leverage. Saquon and Galladay specifically, almost 2x showing up in the sim relative to ownership projections. And then also Danny Dimes a little bit over as well. So when you see that, is that kind of where you're starting to hone in on maybe a leverage spot for captain?
Yeah, I think so. And I think you really you want to have a captain with a lot of ceiling, especially if you're planning on spending all your salary. So again, it kind of comes down to contest type and number of entries and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think you're sort of thinking about things positionally. Ownership projections are, to me, they're a little all over the place for Showdown. So I like to tend to think like, what would people, what do I, for a single game, I think it's pretty easy to get your finger on the pulse of what you think people might be drawn towards. Like, even though quarterback tends to be popular in the captain, perhaps not tonight, with Daniel Jones and Taylor Heineke as your two options. So maybe if you're thinking about going quarterback, tonight's the type of slate that you could do that on. I want to say, how likely do I feel like it is that we have a 100-yard receiver in this game? Because if I feel like there's a 100-yard receiver, then all of a sudden I think that guy has to be just an absolute staple in the captain spot, almost regardless of salary. So, I look at this set of receivers. I don't feel really good about anybody from the Giant side. I know Sterling Shepard actually crossed that mark last week. I don't find that super likely on that side. And then on the Washington side, it's like McLaurin or bust. Maybe an outside chance of Logan Thomas, but so I don't feel really strong about any of the receivers in this game. So that kind of leads me to think, well, hey, maybe quarterback captain is viable. I know Gibson's going to be super popular. So yeah, I think I'm kind of drawn towards that a little bit more normal. And I'm almost always the guy who says, just cancel out the quarterback captain lineups.
Right. And it makes sense, right? I mean, we see Lamar's ownership, reach almost 30% in the captain spot with these quarterbacks. People always, down on Daniel Jones, and then so much uncertainty with Heineke. People aren't necessarily falling over themselves to jam them into captain. But I mean, the thing about both of these guys is they have shown a willingness to play aggressive and make plays, sometimes at their detriment. But as far as a one game slate, like, these guys can definitely get there both with their legs and their weapons.
Yeah, and Daniel Jones may be a really bad NFL quarterback, but for fantasy purposes, he almost always finds a way to get there. Like, he really lifts the floor. Like, I would have a tough time not playing Daniel Jones in my lineup, even against a really tough Washington defense. I wouldn't think too hard about it. Just go ahead and make him a staple.
So then when we tab over here to the custom lineups, the first thing my eyes are going to, and this would be a feature I would love to see if we could get added as well, with just like how often the certain stack configurations are showing up, like 30% 4-2s, 20% 3-3s. But that's kind of what I start glancing for here. What's the first thing that you start, looking for when you get over to the lineups page?
Yeah, as you uploaded that there, I was just like, wow, there's a lot of burgundy and gold up there. So I'm thinking, okay, we're really liking the Washington side of this game. I wonder, so we start talking about ownership on individual players. You start thinking about ownership on different types of game stack configurations or team stacks. And so, I think, obviously 3-3s are going to be popular on almost any type of slate, but I think in this game, you're going to be seeing a lot of 4-2 Washingtons. And it kind of makes me think, well, I'm kind of super interested in some 4-2 New York stacks all of a sudden. Like, can we find a really good lineup that's, fits 4-2 New York? Is that anywhere in the top, 50 lineups or anything like that? Because that might be one I'm super interested in. So I think I just sort of kind of look, the first thing I look at, other than sort of the coloration there, is to see if I see any really good low price lineups. And the top one leaves $1,400 on the table. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Obviously, two low price guys, McKissick and Diami. How are we saying his first name? I'm tripping up on that.
I mess up so many of them. I think I literally say Saquon wrong according to people. I just don't care. What I do now, Justin, is I just say it with confidence, and then I just let people tilt and just never change my ways. Actually, I did give in on Chuba. I was saying Chuba, and
it still feels wrong to say Chuba. I'm not gonna lie.
It does. I've been going with Diami.
Okay, I'm with you. But yeah, so like, I think Diami is going to be popular on this slate, but And people are a little bit forgetting about McKissick. And I think that when I look at that top lineup, I think that's a really interesting build, because not only is it a 2 running back lineup from the same team, which is sort of already unique in its own way, it is a captain running back along with his teammate running back and a quarterback in the same. So I'm like, that's sort of really appealing to me. Then obviously you're getting the 2 best possible Giants back on the other side. And so, and again, that kind of depends on what we want to say is gospel for Saquon this week.
Do you have any, thinking about, people get to funnel towards certain construction. Obviously, the favorites, you'll see way more of the 4-2s in favor of them. What about this lineup here, this 4th one down, where it's a 4-2, but you're actually seeing the 2 side in the captain? I have to assume that's far more unique with the underdog.
Yeah, I think so. Anytime you're going to underdog captain, I think you're going to be sacrificing some ownership there, or coming down off ownership there. So, I like that build a lot. Let's see, Galladay plus Daniel Jones. So you're getting the natural pass catching upside. This is a 100-yard, 1 touchdown game from Galladay, gets you there. And then possibly the Giants get out to a little bit of a lead, and so McKissick's on the field. Again, another double running back lineup there for Washington, which is interesting. And I think a lot of that has to do with the baseline raw expectation of Gibson. Like, he's going to get a big workload, and McKissick's like super dirt cheap this week.
Yeah. I agree. I like this lineup a lot. Also because you're making the subtle pivot off of Diami, who's going to be far more popular than Adam Humphries. I think that's a nice tweak there. Where are you at? This is kind of, you see this all the time. Old optimizers I'd use on these slates. You do not see a lot of kickers in defense popping. Hand builders, and I should specify the toilet hand builders, not of the Deposit Kingdom variety. They love jamming these defenses in good spots on Showdown, but they're normally not showing up at the same proportionate frequency in the simulations.
Yeah, the kickers and defenses are just never going to do that good in the Sims. And some of our subscribers have started to say, like, give us a knob or a lever to turn up the defense and the kickers. And so maybe we'll work something like that in. But I think we're right to not be super into kickers and defense at this point. Now, this is obviously a game where, Washington D is going to attract a lot of ownership. I mean, look, we still have them in there in a flex, almost 21% of the time there. Don't like them in the captain spot, obviously, but they're there. So, I mean, there's some opportunity there for big plays, but I think that's, here's the thing about defenses. The scoring is so random, it's correlated to very little else in the rest of your lineup. So you won't see it repeating as often as the other combinations. Like, it makes sense for the Daniel Jones captain with Shepard and Galladay, going along with him to be paired with 3 other Washington players. Like, that lineup makes sense. Whereas, like, when the Washington defense goes off, it could go with that combination. It could go with this combination. A lot of times it's sort of outside of the sort of correlation logic. It's not entirely correlated as much as some of the other scoring is. And, kickers, like the secret sauce, the way the kickers are calculated here in any simulation is it's based on the yardage calculation for that game. So let's say in a simulation, Washington offense puts up 500 yards of offense and only 1 touchdown in that game. Well, that's a really low sort of touchdown to yardage ratio. Like, you would expect a team with 500 yards to have 4 touchdowns or something.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a really good kicker game in that situation. So kickers got to do with yardage and touchdowns as sort of a factor against each other. Kickers are going to be similar in that regard because, players can still put up a lot of points in those games. And so even in games where kickers are doing well, a lot of times there's somebody else doing pretty well too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now that I feel like we have kind of a good feeling of this overall slate, what the simulation is pushing out in this most, I guess we would say, common outcome for this game. If we do want to go back and tweak, the one I just like doing is basically just flipping the Vegas assumption. So instead of Washington winning by 3 or whatever? What if we have the Giants winning by 3? But this is now I wanted to get back to that specific thing. If I do this, if I'm doing it in the best and smartest way possible, are we adjusting any of the pass and rush rate stuff?
Yeah, I think you almost want to inverse both of those as well. So why don't we
Okay.
drop Washington here down to 18
Yep.
in this instance, drop their pace down by about 4 plays. I think that's what they're chasing. So let's knock that down to 58 and then -5 on the rush rates and knock them down to 40 or so there.
Okay.
And then let's hit the other 3 numbers up there and turn them up to 21, 22, something like that. Pace up to 62 and then rush rate up to, let's just call it 44%. There. And so now we could rerun it under the same. So we're not saying anything's changing in terms of who's getting the football in this game. Now, granted, if you wanted to, if we're thinking it's a Giants blowout or something like that, you could obviously make your changes. And you're still going to get plenty of good Washington players here. There's still enough plays to go around, but you are starting to see Galladay and Shepard creep up the leaderboard in terms of possibility. Giants D actually passes Washington D here in this situation. So you're starting to see a little bit more, blue starting to rise up.
And that, I think Giants D has to be one of the really interesting ones as far as they're probably going to go under-owned with hand builders just because most people are going to play it from the Washington game script. So that starts to get interesting. You also see Daniel Jones flip Antonio Gibson for the total used. Let's now look at some of these lineups and see the texture of them. And this is what I was kind of wondering, if the value still is so good on the Washington side that it overpowers even the game script flip. And we are still seeing a lot of 4-2s here and even an onslaught with Washington in this scenario.
Yep, exactly. So it's still possible for Washington to get there. Part of that's got to do with the fact they have more affordable options. We have Diami Brown and Adam Humphries, both starting wide receivers, priced under $5K, and Diami's less than $2K if I recall. Whereas the premier playmakers for the Giants are priced up a good bit. Galladay and Sterling Shepard certainly are up there. So I think it's got to do with the concentration of targets. We're getting a lot of Saquon popping up there towards the top couple lineups there. So I think it's an interesting puzzle of affordability and raw points, and that's kind of the beauty of the optimization. And we've all played Showdown slates, and it's like 0.04 points that separates lineup number 1 from lineup number 2, like that one passing yard that's in the captain spot as opposed to in the flex. And that was what changed the entire slate. And it would have been a completely different combination otherwise. You're really starting to put some math on that. And that was a point Brian made today, is like, when you're talking about so many various inputs, like it's impossible for your brain to absorb all that and quantify it. And so that's kind of the beauty of what you've got in front of you, is that this is a direct quantification, is that the word, of sort of the script that you've laid out there.
And in this specific example, what are your thoughts when you do see Diami show up here? He's showing up as the captain in these top 3 most frequent lineups. It's interesting in that that's happening in a negative game script for Washington. He wasn't popping quite like that with the Washington victory game script. We see that sometimes, right, where it is the super value guy is who shows up here because it allows you to fit in all the other studs. The simulation, though, is doing more work for us than just a pure optimizer would, of just jamming these points in. How do you handle a situation like that when Diami could only get 3 targets tonight, but he's still popping here as a captain?
Yeah, I think that comes completely back to the type of contest that you're entering. And if you're playing a 20-man, then I think Diami's not live to be in the captain spot. I don't think the risk is worth the reward there. However, if we're talking about the Millie Maker and you're going up against 100,000 people, then of course he's live. Any combination, period, is live there. And sort of when you're talking about super large field stuff, I think you got to get out of the idea of like, is this individual player over or under leveraged? Is he going to be over or under owned? Like it doesn't matter whether the player is. What's the combination going to be? Is the combination itself going to be over or under owned compared to things? We've got 5,000 simulations here is what we're looking at. And, we're saying that the frequency here of that top lineup, given the script that we've laid out, is 12 out of 5,000. That's 0.24%. Kind of thinking about, well, what type of contest would I want to take that type of swing in? And of course, it's going to be a super large field contest.
Gotcha. So for people who are, say, the sickos that might be playing Showdown Cash, or are, say, playing very small field tournaments, maybe 100-man, or like you just mentioned, a 20-man, how would you recommend that they use the Sims to still make smart decisions?
I think you don't tweak anything. You take the baseline assumptions, you run them, and then you look for you start to look across the lineups for the one that seems to offer the safest captain. I think you go from starting to think about who is the most enticing captain to who is the safest captain, or who only needs one thing to go right for them to pop off as the winning captain. And so, like maybe Saquon's actually a good example here. Like we don't think he's going to be super high on because people are scared to death. But if he is getting a full workload tonight, which is certainly possible, then you got that one thing right. You're the only guy who played Saquon in a 20-man tournament, and he goes for 80 or 120 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. And we got the one thing right, which was full workload, and everything else paid off from there. So I just kind of would look at the entire lineups and kind of gauge a level of risk associated with it, because they're not necessarily in order of sort of, which one would take down 20-man or 100-man.
Yeah, for sure. Why don't we wrap up here by building a lineup? We can try to marry kind of looking at these Sims with hand building a lineup, you and me together here. And, because I think this is the way a lot of people ultimately are going to be using things, as far as trying to, that's how I've enjoyed doing it. I do want to get into some 20 max stuff here shortly once I get my head on straight and stop spinning from the start of the season. But where do you start here now that we've looked at a few different things? Or would you go revert back to kind of the default setting and go back to those lineups here?
Go back and let's run the Sims again from scratch with the just zeroing out all the old inputs.
Yep.
And then let's go to your projections tab after that. And so basically you're getting simulated projections of which players are going to pop up most towards the top of the lineup. So we've got Gibson, Jones, Heineke, Barkley, McLaurin, Galladay, Shepard, and Logan Thomas. So then a big gap after that. So those are the only guys projected at 10. So I'm almost starting to think, what contest are we playing in tonight, Pete?
I'm gonna throw this into the big dog for us. We're gonna get Galaxy Brain here.
Okay, so we're Galaxy Brain in it. Okay, perfect. I guess it would sort of start by saying, are you interested in playing a defense tonight or not?
I mean, probably if we do, I would want it to be Giants, right? Okay. Just to make it, because if we think Washington's going to get overused and be chalky, I mean,
I'd say let's scratch both the defenses.
Yeah.
And let's start thinking about position players and sort of how they correlate. So next, let's decide on, do we want to lean towards a particular construction 4-2 giant stack? I think we're kind of liking that leverage.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that'll give us a unique lineup. And I assume in that one, we do want a giant then as our captain. And that was what looked nicest to me relative to ownership projections.
Exactly. So do we want to go with the Galladay captain lineup? Or do
I
you
like
want
it?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm starting to warm up on Galladay the more we talk through it.
Yeah. He is still Kenny Galladay in the game. So we're, obviously we just saw, what was it? The Tampa game had Gronk captain, 3 other Bucks and no Brady. Is that right?
Yeah.
But I almost think you got to go Daniel Jones here to pair with Galladay. Don't Galaxy Brain it that much.
Yeah.
All right. So we're looking at $6,800 per.
Yep.
We want to leave some salary on the table today, Pete?
I think so. I mean, I think probably at least 1,000 and maybe a little bit more, I would assume.
Okay, so our low price guys that we like are Diami.
I'm kind of liking the pivot from Diami to Humphreys just with the ownership difference.
Love it. Let's go. Let's throw hump in there.
That's the new phrase for this show. Let's start humping.
So we got 7,500 per left. Logan Thomas, I think, is kind of set up in a unique spot this week where, we only got one more Washington player left to play. How do you feel? Let's talk about this. How do you feel about the Saquon Booker thing? Because you could play Booker if you wanted to fade Saquon.
Yeah, I guess I wonder now, is that the ultimate galaxy brain where you have the Giants winning, but Saquon has nothing to do with it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Why don't you want to try to throw a Saquon in there? Are we going pro
Yeah, let's
Saquon on this game?
let's just
Okay.
see. We get the Giant studs going off, Humphreys, and then yeah, I think Logan Thomas, if everyone's jamming McLaurin and Gibson going down to the Humphreys and Logan Thomas, I feel like that makes some sense.
Let's do it and then see who we have left.
Also makes sense that those guys over the middle be, soaking up the targets, the easier stuff. That leaves us with 5,100.
I know who it's going to be. It's going to be
Kyle Rudolph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew it.
I mean, that's a perfect lineup.
That's the winner. I mean,
don't dupe us, bros. Don't dupe us.
Don't dupe us, please. $1,900 left on the table. Are you kidding me? That's a 4-2 Giant stack. You gotta love it.
I do love it. Yeah, we are going to get you guys on your way. I have to go. I have one in the $100 single entry, so I need to go build that. That's why I was picking your brain about a little bit more. It's a small. I think it's only like 111 person contest, so I need to go think through that. But Justin, as I told you, you're more than welcome anytime you want to come by on a Monday or Thursday night and chop it up. But absolutely loving using Run the Sims tools. So excited that you guys are working hard to continue to improve it and add new features. Of course, you guys can get 10% off any Run the Sims package with promo code Pete. You can be fiddling with this stuff all day. Obviously, the main slate screener that we used on Sunday morning show is a huge part of my main slate hand building lineup process. Justin, anything else I'm forgetting here that people should know about RTS?
That's it. Yeah, we've got a pretty nice little weekly newsletter. So even if you don't want to pay for a premium account, go get your free one. You'll get the newsletter right up in your inbox once a week. You will go over sort of our top plays that we're looking at on every Thursday. And go ahead and hop on in and use promo code Pete.
Yep, that's right. And obviously, you guys, you can hop in the Run the Sims Discord. If you guys have questions for Justin, they got a good community going in there. You can hop in the Deposit Kingdom Discord as well. All kinds of good places to brainstorm these slates. I will be back tomorrow at noon for a strategy show with Eric Beimfor, another channel favorite here. We'll be walking through the main slate from a GPP perspective. So yeah, you can look forward to that. And then we'll also be back for Splash Play in the afternoon. We have my buddy Pat Corain coming through as well. So another full day of content. Thank you to Justin Freeman. Good luck in your Showdown slates. It's hump day, folks.